Hello you, it's me. Today I'm going to talk to you about The Sunken Land Begins to Rise Again by M. John Harrison. The book follows two characters, the first of which is Shaw, who, following some kind of unnamed crisis in his life, is living a life, as he puts it, without explanation. He went to a horrible room in London, takes up a job in an office on a boat in the Thames, working for a strange guy called Tim, helping him sell copies of some crackpot genetics book, spy on a psychic medium who may or may not be this guy's sister, collect medicinal water from graves, and attend these weird court cases where defendants seem absolutely convinced that whenever they pee, they're seeing these weird green fetuses in the toilet. All the while this is happening, he's trying to care for his Alzheimer's suffering mother in a care home just down the road from where he lives. He has a relationship with the second character, Victoria, who has seen a dead body for the first time at the age of 12 as sort of her defining characteristic, and she moves away from London to the West Midlands to inherit a house from her dead mother. She befriends a waitress who regularly vanishes from her life with no explanation. She watches people walk into and disappear in 2-foot deep ponds. She finds out that her mother was leading a completely different life and was not who she thought she was at all. And as the seasons change, the water in the aquifers underneath the town begin to swell and rise, and all the occupants of the town begin to behave much more strangely, and they all seem sort of obsessed with pushing this book on her and convincing her to read it, which is the Victorian children's novel The Water Babies. While this is a really beautifully written book, I feel like a lot of people probably would not like it because it's not a really A to B story with a goal. It's a series of events in the lives of these two characters that happen against a backdrop of much stranger events, which are happening just out of view. But this is a really, really emotional, pretty, and really like a comfy book. It's the book equivalent of like a rain sounds playlist. Story-wise and style-wise, this felt really similar to the works of Ian Banks, not his sci-fi, just his more surrealist stuff. And I really got big Walking on Glass vibes from this. I think they're very similar novels. And I think Harrison and Banks do have an incredibly similar way of writing at times. The only other thing I've read by M. John Harrison is his Kefahuchi Tract trilogy. Try saying that 3 times quick. Which was Light, Nova Swing, and Empty Space, which I think is one of the best trilogies, honestly, I've ever read. So I think annoyingly, because I love that series so much, I went into this series with really high expectations of what it would be. And while it's a really good book, it's nowhere near as good as that trilogy. It has a very different feel. However, there's a heck of a lot of things that I loved in this book, and really honestly, almost nothing I can fault this book on, being a fan of the sort of new weird. One thing I really liked that I feel a lot of people probably might not was the fact that zero background was given for these characters at all, and their character were totally defined for us as readers by the events that occurred after the ground zero start of the book. It mentions 2 things: that Shaw has had a crisis of some kind, which is never explained, never named, and is recovering from that, and Victoria saw a dead body as a child. That's it. That's all we have to define these 2 characters in our minds. They were both incredibly believable characters and were almost the anchors of normal, while all this surreal, strange stuff is going on around them and they're trying to understand it. For me, I really think one of the main themes of this book was people's inability to connect with each other, and I feel like giving us no background of who these people are was probably intentional to contribute to that. And it's weird because while these characters have all these strange things going on in their lives, when they interact with each other, all they share is the mundane, banal stuff that means absolutely nothing. And it makes me think that one of the messages of this book may be that we're all having shared experiences, that we have common denominators in our lives, that we think we're going through alone, but we really aren't. And I like that both the characters were older. Victoria, I think, is in her 40s, and Shaw, I think, is about 50. And I think that that is a period of life that people can really start to feel secluded and alone in. Beside M. John Harrison's really fantastic use of language, fantastic use of psychogeography, which I think is a term he's coined, tying characters into locations in a really emotional way. One of the constantly recurring things in this book was the use of parallels between the two characters, which again really adds to the whole, you're having a similar experience, just share, you're not on your own. There's the obvious West London, West Midlands parallel. It's a tale of two rivers, the Thames and the Severn, which both play an important part in the story. Both the characters are trying to have a personal relationship and understand their mother. And there's the rising and falling of the groundwater for Victoria and the daily ebb and flow of the tide for Shaw, which I thought were really good, interesting parallels. There's a lot of prophetic fallacy in this book, with emotion really tied into the weather. And I think sometimes, especially in film, that can come across as a bit cheesy. There are a lot of scenes in this with things obscured by mist or heavy rain, but I think really where it comes into play is the sort of slow burn of the seasonal change. From spring to winter, as the mindset and stability of the characters really changes alongside that. And all the while there's this rising sense of dread almost that's represented by the encroaching water, the slow flood. There are really a lot of water themes in this book, and it really makes for a very pretty read. There's a big sense in this story of you never know what's going on behind closed doors, sometimes literally, with Shaw having a mysterious padlocked door at the back of his office and a mysterious neighbour who he never sees. There's a theme of living for the approval of other people, with Shaw constantly frustrated at his mother's disapproval of where his life is at, and Victoria, who constantly emails Shaw updates about her life as sort of a sounding board, really justifying her actions to him, but feeling like it's herself that she's trying to justify herself to, if that makes sense. While there are fantasy and surreal elements to this book, they occur in a really disjointed, almost dreamlike way. And they really do seem often incidental, unimportant, and are dismissed as soon as they occur. In the way that you'll be in a dream and you'll notice something in your dream that is so... in your waking life, you would just be like, what? But in your dream seems completely normal, mundane, and you just like, yeah, whatever, accept instantly. And I feel like it's symbolic of people dismissing things that aren't in their circle of reference, don't impact their life directly. While the events happening in the background's building strangeness was something that I really did feel contributed to a rising sense of anxiety, I did find it very hard myself to piece together the narrative of what was actually happening in the background. And honestly, I can definitely understand both of the possible reasons for that. Number one, I just didn't get it. It went totally over my head and I missed something important and I'll have to read it again. Number two, that was intentional and was totally done to further the feeling of disconnect, that somebody else's life is just occurring in a way that is not, I don't know what I'm saying, that somebody else's life is occurring just so completely separate from yours. And Victoria and Shaw find themselves more and more fading into the background scenery of this surreal fantasy underground world, becoming more accepting of, but also more frustrated by the things happening around them which they can't explain, and they feel less and less able to object to as things go on. This is really difficult because I'm really trying to do this without spoilers, but I think this is a book that you really have to review the style and message of more than the story. And I know I'm not giving a lot away about the story, but I hope I can sell it to you just with what I feel about it, I guess. And one of the biggest themes here, I think, for me, what I got out of it was the danger, even more than societal and relationship disconnect, was the danger of just sitting there and waiting for life to happen to you. And it's mentioned directly by Shaw's mum, but I think is represented in Harrison's choice of rivers as a setting for the story, and made clear in one of Shaw's revelations of boats becoming islands. The idea of being rooted while everything around you passes you by, and really fought against at the end of the book, a bit of a spoiler, by the characters moving away from the rivers and rejecting what is essentially the passive lifestyle they've been leading up to this point. In fact, the lesson could be that not taking control of your life and waiting for things to happen to you is exactly what causes this emotional disconnect that both these characters are experiencing, and their inability to connect with other people. The idea that if you wait too long to take control, eventually you may not be able to take control. So steer your life while you can. I feel like that review was kind of disjointed. Thanks for sticking with me. Give it a read. If you've read it already, it's quite a new release, only came out a few weeks ago. If you've read it already, let me know what you thought down in the comments. Pop a comment below. Have you read any of M. John Harrison's other stuff? I'd love to hear what you thought about the Kefahuji Track trilogy or Viraconium, which is on my TBR. Hopefully I'll get to it pretty soon. I'm on Twitter now. I'll drop a link down below. So follow me on there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Love the interaction, supportive community. Thanks for watching. That's pretty much it. I will see you next time.